Thursday, June 27th, 2024, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today we're going to look at how the globalists, the people that attend the Davos Forum, World Economic Forum, they're looking to be in charge of global taxation as well. They want to be controlling nations, which basically means no sovereignty for nations. And they're doing it through the back door, so to speak. They want to propose a minimum tax on billionaires to raise $250 billion a year. And you might say, well, who cares about billionaires? Well, I'm here to warn you that it starts with the billionaires and then it trickles down to the general public as well. That's how it always happens with government or global government, if you give them an inch of power, I would say. And that's what we're going to look at today. Just wanted to give a quick shout out to the Dirty Man Safe. Check the link below in the description. The Dirty Man Safe is a great way to keep your gold, silver, or even your crypto hard wallet or anything else that's precious to you safe from the prying eye, not just of criminals, but also of the state. In this day and age where the rule of law has been trampled on, you never know what's going to happen. So yeah, check out the link below. You get a 10% discount if you use my link, and you also get a free gift from the Dirty Man Safe. Before we go into that though, just want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the markets and in the fiscal and monetary world. Of course, in the US, we're continuing to see fiscal dominance. The deficits are going, getting out of control in the US, fast approaching 2 trillion this fiscal year. We're seeing also in terms of monetary policy, we're seeing the Treasury, US Treasury perform monetary policy through the Treasury General account. They had $941 billion in that account as of April 25th, 2024, as you can see here. But as of May 30th, it was down to $704 billion, and that's showing up in the M2 numbers. And M2, of course, for me, that's an indicator. Well, that's inflation. When it's growing, it's inflation. When it's dropping, it's deflation. And yes, I have to admit, we saw deflation in the last 2 years, but now it's starting to pick up again. And when the Fed joins the party, i.e. when they stop the QT, when they start doing QE and cutting rates, it's going to get a lot worse. And that's why inflation expectations, or long-term inflation expectations, as you can see here, are a lot higher than they've been in the past. The markets don't buy it. And talking about the markets, we're seeing the yen continue to melt down. It made a 38-year low yesterday, almost up to $161, while the dollar made a 38-year high. It's a bit tricky talking about foreign exchange, but yes, the yen dropped and the dollar went up to a 38-year high. Why is that important? Well, because the Japanese yen and the financial system of Japan is very important in terms of providing liquidity for the treasury market. And I think that's why we saw 10-year yields yesterday rise about 8 basis points. And we're continuing to see it rise this morning, another 2. We're at 434. We're even seeing Australian treasury yields, Australian government bond yields go up this morning. So yes, I think we are in the beginning, in the first few innings, so to speak, of a new inflationary wave. I think yes, it's going to be a lot worse than the first one. because that's how inflation waves go. If you look back at the 70s, they start here and then they go higher and higher. And I don't think governments, politicians, central banks have any intention of reining in inflation, because our current fiat currency system, that's a debt-based system, feeds on inflation. You can't stop inflating, and the more debt you create, the more inflation you need to create. And the United States Treasury and its deficit spending and debt is a big example of that, and it's going to get a lot worse as rates rise. I think a lot of people who are of the belief that we're going to see low rates like we saw in the last 15 or 20 years or so, if there's a recession, I think they're going to be proven wrong. So that's what's going on in terms of the markets. And I think you need to keep an eye on the dollar yen. The higher the dollar goes, the worse it is for treasuries and for the whole financial system. Of course, right now, the Treasury is kind of doing not just fiscal policy, but monetary policy. So they might be able to keep things going for now. But all that will do is create more and more inflation in the future, or rising prices, or a weaker currency, dollar debasement. So let's get back to this minimum tax on billionaires that the FT talked about here. It came out yesterday, this article, and I thought it was interesting. Is it because I'm a defender of billionaires, or I think, no, I'm a defender of private property. And the one thing I would say, these people are uber socialists, of course, the globalists. And you might think, oh no, they're capitalists. No, they're socialists or communists even. J.D. Rockefeller said he hated competition. So what a better system to kill the competition than the socialist or communist system, where the big corporations work with the government to kill the competition. And that's what this is about. And this minimum tax on billionaires, that's just another example of this. Billionaires, of course, would find ways around it. But I think the worst part of this is that it usually starts, taxes start on the very wealthy, and then it trickles down. Yeah, they do trickle down, because if you look at the income tax in the United States, I'll read through here on Wikipedia, the Revenue Act of 1913. It says, the Revenue Act of 1913 restored a federal income tax for the first time since 1872. The federal government had also adopted an income tax in the Wilson-Gorman Tariff Act, but that tax had been struck down by the Supreme Court in the case of Pollock versus Farmers Loan and Trust Co. The Revenue Act of 1913 imposed a 1% tax on incomes above $3,000, with a top tax rate of 6% on those earning more than $500,000 per year. Well, who earned more than $500,000 per year back in 1913? Well, they were the billionaires of that time. Approximately 3% of the population, 3%, was subject to the income tax. My point here is that it started as a very small tax, very minimal, very few people paid, except for the robber barons of that time. And they're doing the same thing now. Don't be fooled by it. I know there's a lot of resentment about billionaires these days, and I can understand it. wealth inequality is probably at one of the most extreme levels since then, since you had the robber barons of the late 1800s, early 1900s. But nowadays, the reason why we have billionaires, and maybe we might even have trillionaires if they keep inflating everything, is because of governments. It's because of fiat currency and the debt-based system. They're not looking at the problem here. And of course, socialists don't. And the guy who's proposing this, someone called Gabriel Zucman, he's a disciple of Thomas Piketty, another French socialist. And it's not surprising that the French push this socialist agenda. I mean, France is the biggest, the government takes the most revenue out of the economy, out of the G7, as you can see here, over 50%. And as if it wasn't enough, they want to push this socialist, globalist agenda to the whole of the G20. But the danger here, as I said, is that people will say, oh, that's great, billionaires, they need to pay their share. But then in 5-10 years, you're going to be paying your share. And there will be nowhere that you can go. Like a lot of people are going to Dubai or other tax havens. The globalist net would engulf the whole world, and there would be nowhere to hide. And I think that's why this is dangerous. And they're going here after not the income of billionaires. They're going actually after their property, their investments. It's like a wealth tax. And they could come after you, even if you're not a billionaire, even if you've done relatively well, but you're just a normal person who worked hard all your life and been able to save a nest egg. And I think this is very dangerous, and we need to put aside this, how can I say, division that they themselves will make. They'll say, oh, billionaires, they need to throw their weight behind this. But I would say the governments are the biggest problems. The governments are the biggest destroyers of wealth and prosperity because of their taxation, because of the government spending. What we need, Mr. Zucman and the G20, is less government, minimal government, and then everyone will prosper. Yes, there will always be millionaires, billionaires, and I would venture to say we wouldn't have as many billionaires today if we hadn't gone off a fairly sound monetary base or system back in '71 when Nixon detached the dollar from gold. And we wouldn't also have as many billionaires if the central banks and governments hadn't been bailing out banks, hedge funds, corporations since '08. I think things would be a lot more sane. And that's the reason why I think this is wrong, completely wrong. It's not just immoral, of course, because taxation is immoral. And it's disappointing because it was a Frenchman back in 1850 who wrote this book, The Law, Frederick Bastiat. And now the biggest pushers of socialism and wealth destruction are so-called French economists like Gabriel Zucman and Thomas Piketty. And hopefully people won't buy into it. They talked about this apparently at the G20 in Brazil early this year. And it says here that the US and China were not too keen on it because they've got the most billionaires. But it says ministers from South Africa, Spain, France, Germany have backed the proposal. Zucman said Belgium, Colombia, and the African Union were also supportive of the levy. But U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen seemed to reject the idea last month. Well, there's one thing I agree with Janet Yellen, is this. And I'll read again what Frederick Bastiat said over 150 years ago. The state is that great fiction by which everyone tries to live at the expense of everyone else. And I agree that a lot of billionaires have benefited from the fiat currency system, from huge government spending. Yes, but it's still not the right thing to do, to tax people's wealth. Not even income. I think tax should be very minimal. Government should be very minimal. But when government gets involved in taking individuals' property, that's wrong. And then you go a step further and you have like a global government by who knows who, you know, we don't even know who's really behind this. But it's interesting that the photo of this Gabriel Zucman in this article, as you can see here, he's talking at the World Economic Forum. I've noticed that they put a picture here that you can't really see it, but by now most of you can recognize that he was talking there at the World Economic Forum. So there you go. I guess here in the UK, if Labour wins next week, and I think there's a good chance it will, I'm sure they'll back this. You know, that's the philosophy of Labour. I'm not saying the Conservatives are that much better because they haven't really done a great job. Yeah, and they shut down the economy and printed and borrowed hundreds of billions of pounds. So yeah, it might sound strange, but we need to defend even billionaires' rights. They should not be taxed by a global authority, because if they can do it to billionaires, they're going to come after you. They're going to have all the mechanisms for not just monitoring billionaires' financial affairs. They're going to have that also for the nurses, for the school teachers, for everyone. And I think it's a dangerous situation where there's one world power controlling billions of people. So yeah, with that, I'm going to wish you all a very good day. Take care. Bye.